Frederick Henry Royce entered the world on the 27th of March, 1863, in Alwalton, a village so small it barely warranted a name, as the youngest of 5 children to a miller who was losing his battle against poverty. This is not a story that begins with privilege. It begins with flour dust and debt. Henry's father was finally declared bankrupt, and under the law of the time, imprisoned. The family relocated to London, not in search of opportunity, but in search of escape. At the age of 9, Royce's father passed away. He had to work to contribute to his family's income, selling newspapers and delivering telegrams. By the time he turned 15, he had completed only 1 year of school. 1 year of school. That is the formal education of the man who would design the engine that shaped the Battle of Britain. Let that land. At the age of 14, an aunt arranged for him to become an apprentice to the Great Northern Railway Company's locomotive works in Peterborough. He stayed there for 3 years, where he gained an enthusiasm for engineering. Royce took every opportunity to educate himself, spending his evenings studying algebra, French, and electrical engineering. He did not wait for the world to teach him. He reached into the dark and pulled knowledge out by force, but the money ran out. 3 years in, the aunt could no longer fund him. He worked briefly for a tool-making company in Leeds before returning to London, joining the Electric Light and Power Company, eventually moving to their Liverpool office, working on street and theater lighting. This was the age of electricity, and Royce walked straight into it. With a natural talent for engineering, Royce landed a job with the Electric Light and Power Company. His true ambition was to make engineering his full-time job, and that's when he started a business with his fellow engineer friend, Ernest Claremont, working around the clock to make electrical components such as doorbells and dynamos. It was during this time that Royce patented improvements to the bayonet light bulb that are still in use today. In 1884, he moved to Manchester and with Ernest Albert Claremont founded an engineering business, F.H. Royce and Company, manufacturing switches, fuses, and bell sets. He was 21 years old. He had built something from nothing, and he had only just started. In 1894, Royce and Claremont converted their business into a limited company, Royce Limited, which specialized in manufacturing dynamos and motors. While the company did well in the first couple of years, the Second Boer War from 1899 meant that domestic investment was reduced, and the company lost out to more competitive businesses. At the same time, Royce became increasingly interested in road vehicles, a cause of concern for his colleagues. They were right to be concerned. Once Henry Royce fixed his attention on something, it consumed him entirely. On his return from a continental holiday, Royce acquired his first motor car, a French-built 10-horsepower Decauville. The story usually goes that this first car was so poorly made and unreliable that Royce decided he could do better. In fact, his holiday reading had already focused his mind on producing his own car. He chose the Decauville precisely because it was one of the finest cars available to him. In order to dismantle it and then, in his most famous phrase, take the best that exists and make it better. That phrase would become the genetic code of an empire. In 1903, Royce bought a small Decauville car manufactured in France and set about improving it to his standards. This led to the production of a 10-horsepower, 2-cylinder automobile he named Royce, which first ran on April 1st, 1904. The third Royce car had been sold to one of the other directors, Henry Edmunds. Edmunds was a friend of Charles Rolls, who had a car showroom in London selling imported models, and he showed him his car and arranged the historic meeting between Rolls and Royce at the newly opened Midland Hotel, Manchester on the 4th of May, 1904. Charles Rolls was everything Royce was not, on paper. Born in 1877 at 18 Hill Street, Mayfair, London, Charles Stuart Rolls was the third son of Lord and Lady Langaddock. After school at Eton, Rolls studied mechanical engineering at Trinity College, Cambridge, where he was the first undergraduate to own a motor car. There is a detail here that stops you cold. Historian Malcolm Tucker documented that during his years as a telegram boy, the young Royce worked a beat through Mayfair, including Hill Street. It is entirely possible that the boy who would one day build the finest cars in the world, that the two men were orbiting each other's lives before either knew the other existed. The two men could hardly have come from more different backgrounds. Rolls had been educated at Cambridge and moved comfortably in London society. Among his aristocratic and wealthy friends, Royce had known poverty and hardship all his life. And yet, when Rolls sat behind the wheel of Royce's 2-cylinder machine and felt the silence, the refined smoothness, the sheer improbability of the thing, he was undone. Despite Rolls' preference for 3- or 4-cylinder cars, He was impressed with the two-cylinder Royce 10. In an agreement reached on December 23, 1904, it was agreed that Royce would exclusively supply Rolls with vehicles across a range of models, all to be badged as Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce Limited was formally established in 1906, combining Royce's engineering brilliance with Rolls' business acumen. The company set out to create the world's most luxurious and technologically advanced cars. Then came the Silver Ghost, the first 40 to 50 horsepower six-cylinder car, retrospectively known as the Silver Ghost, made its appearance in November 1906 and, with many improvements in its design, was produced for the next 19 years. The Silver Ghost was the origin of Rolls-Royce's claim of making the best car in the world, a phrase coined not by themselves, but by the prestigious publication Autocar in 1907. From telegram boy to maker of the best car in the world in 44 years. But now, the darkness under the surface. At the time, it was not uncommon for Royce to work 36 hours without stopping. He never ate properly. He had no concept of rest. He was renowned for never eating proper meals, which resulted in him being taken ill first in 1902 and again in 1911. And his marriage, a detail often quietly passed over, was unraveling beneath the public success. Royce married Minnie Grace Punt on the 16th of March, 1893. Both sisters disliked emotional and physical intimacy and had a fear of becoming pregnant. Royce and his wife separated in 1912. He was a man who poured every drop of himself into machines and left nothing for the people around him. Then, in July 1910, Charles Rolls died when his Wright Flyer aircraft broke apart during a flying display at Bournemouth. He was 32 years old, the first Briton to die in a powered aircraft accident. The man who had given the company its name, its social reach, and its commercial direction was gone before the decade was out. Royce, characteristically, did not stop working. But the partnership that had made everything possible was now carried by one man alone. He had a major operation in London in 1912 and was given only a few months to live by the doctors. The doctors were wrong by 21 years. Royce's health broke down in 1911 and he was persuaded to leave his factory in Derby, taking a team of designers with him and moving to the south of England, spending winters in the south of France. This is where the story becomes genuinely extraordinary. Here is a man who cannot visit his own factory, who is medically prohibited from the place he built with his bare hands, and yet he insisted on checking all new designs. Engineers and draftsmen had to take the drawings to be personally checked by him, a daunting prospect given his well-known perfectionism. The mountain went to Muhammad. Every drawing, every blueprint, carried across England to a sick man on a Sussex coast who would tear them apart and demand better. Then history took a darker turn. Following the start of the First World War, Royce began designing Rolls-Royce's first aircraft engine, the Rolls-Royce Eagle. Introduced in 1915, he signaled his seriousness by reducing his own salary as his contribution to the war effort. For the first time since 1911, Royce traveled to Derby in August 1914 to inspect a captured German Daimler Mercedes engine, allowed only an hour with it, which he somehow managed to extend by another hour before Aubin insisted he stop. Around half of all Allied aircraft in that war flew with Rolls-Royce engines, all designed by Sir Henry. Nearly 7 months after the war ended, John Alcock and Arthur Whitten Brown crossed the Atlantic in a Vickers-Vimy biplane fitted with 2 Rolls-Royce Eagle engines, completing the first aerial crossing of the Atlantic. Now the darkest personal note in this story, and one worth facing directly. His nurse, Ethel Aubin, had entered his life in 1911. Following his serious illness that year, Aubin took increasing control of Royce's private life. Her concern for his well-being and professional skills allowed Royce to live for a further 22 years. In his will, Royce stated she was my nurse for over 20 years and who has done so much to prolong my life. He left her his house, Elmstead, its lands and furniture, as well as 2/5 of his remaining estate in trust. He also left his estranged wife 2/5 of his estate in trust. The nature of his relationship with Aubin, professional protector or something more, has been a matter of careful understatement in historical accounts. What is documented is this: she was with him every day for 22 years. She outlived him. She kept his ashes, and he left her his home. Then October 1928 happened. West Wittering Beach, and the moment that changed aviation history. In October 1928, he began the design of the R engine while walking with some of his leading engineers on the beach at West Wittering, sketching ideas in the sand. Less than a year later, the R engine set a new world airspeed record of 357.7 miles per hour and won the Schneider Trophy. Royce developed the R to produce more power, and the Supermarine S-6B seaplane won the 1931 trophy at 340.08 miles per hour. On September 29th, the same aircraft became the first to fly at over 400 miles per hour, breaking the world speed record at 407.5 miles per hour. And from that engine, sketched in the sand by a man given only months to live 19 years earlier, came something the world would need desperately. The PV-12, private venture, 12-cylinder, was launched in October 1933 and completed its first test in 1934, the year after Royce died. The PV-12 became the legendary Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the engine that powered the Spitfire, the engine that powered the Hurricane, the engine whose lineage Royce set in motion, designed by a man who never went to school. Royce was appointed OBE in 1918 and was created a baronet of Seaton in the county of Rutland in 1930 for his services to British aviation. He was 67 years old, half dead, and still working harder than most men a third his age. Royce's adjustable shock absorber was to be his last engineering innovation, which he persisted with despite his failing health. Even on his deathbed, he worked on the shock absorber, the last sketch annotated by his nurse. The night before he died, he sat up in bed and sketched on the back of an envelope, which he gave to his nurse, telling her to see that the boys in the factory got it safely. Think about what that means. The man's organs are failing, the candle is guttering, and his final act, his last conscious contribution to the world, is a technical drawing for his engineers, not a letter to a loved one, not a prayer, a sketch. "I have only one regret," Sir Henry Royce said as he lay dying, "that I have not worked harder." He died on 22nd April 1933 at his house in West Wittering, Sussex. The cause of death was cancer. As per Royce's request, there were no mourners or flowers at his funeral, and only 2 people were allowed at his cremation. He had built one of the most recognizable brands in human history, and he went out alone, quietly, with almost no ceremony, because that was who he was. His cremated remains were initially buried under his statue at the Rolls-Royce Works in Derby. In 1937, his urn was removed to the parish church of Alwalton, his birthplace. He began in Alwalton. He ended in Alwalton, a full circle drawn by a man who spent his entire life refusing to move in anything but a straight line. In 1962, a memorial window dedicated to his memory was unveiled in Westminster Abbey, the only occasion an engineer has been honored in this way. And then there is the Merlin. The Merlin provided not just the Hurricane and Spitfire of the Battle of Britain with spectacular performance, but virtually every notable British aircraft during the Second World War. Henry Royce died in 1933. The Merlin flew in 1935. He never heard it run. And yet without him, without that 1 year of school, without the telegram rounds, without the bankrupt father and the starving apprenticeship and the 36-hour shifts, and the beach at West Wittering and the sketch on the back of an envelope, the lineage that produced the Merlin does not exist. On April 23, 1933, the New York Times ran a headline simply stating, "Sir Henry Royce, Automan, is dead." In the sub-editor's notes beneath, "began as a newsboy," and his insistence on quality led to the creation of new standard in automobile making. Began as a newsboy.